Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Good morning. Jeez. Stay warm, stay on your feet. It's a cold and icy day here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, December 12th, 2024 to be exact. Good God. Ugh. So anyway, I have to, again, there's so much to be freaked out about in the news, so let's not, at least right now. I can't. So let me instead tell you of something I did last night. And why am I'm sorry. There's distractions here. Excuse me. Okay, I'm focusing. Something I did last night because it reminded me, not that I really needed reminding, of how much I love this city and why I stayed here for most of my life, never intending to when I came, being seduced by it and what it has to offer. And, you get to a point, and I'm at a point where I'm, old. I'm an old person. And you don't expect, I think, when you're old to be to have new vistas opened up to you. That's, you think, is something that happens in your youth. But I was reminded last night that no, new vistas are always out there. I guess it's a matter of, yes, getting out enough to perhaps encounter them. I mean, I'm speaking of an actual literal new vista in that I saw Pittsburgh, the incredible view. I mean, there are so many, but I saw one I had never seen last night. I was in a place that gave me a vantage point that I've never had. This is such an extraordinarily beautiful, interesting city to explore. So where I found myself was up, obviously, up on a hill, and I believe it was technically Spring Hill, although I thought I was going to Troy Hill. I'm assuming those two are close together. I don't know, but I thought I was in Troy Hill, and then I heard somebody say Spring Hill. But it's up there above maybe what I thought of was Germantown. I'm on the north side, and I'm looking across the Allegheny River last night at the downtown Pittsburgh and the Point lit up, and I'm in a Pittsburgh neighborhood I'd never been in, but like so many Pittsburgh neighborhoods, it was fascinating. Little streets coming out of nowhere, following the terrain. You can tell these streets were made from, goat paths or whatever. I mean, they're not laid out in any kind of perpendicular. You're all over the place. Little streets, and they dead end all of a sudden, and regular a mix of all kinds of different homes, mostly old and modest. And I was invited to a a holiday party that was given by two neighbors, neither of whom I particularly knew, one of whom I had met once. And the party started at one home and then decamped to the other home, which was just, a lot of steps going down away. Um, the odd thing, I have to tell you, of how I met the person that invited me uh, to this, and I don't think I've told you this, but um, it was, I think, maybe about 6 weeks ago that I was invited at the last minute to help fill out a table at a nonprofit's anniversary party. This nonprofit is a particularly, it's a great one. It's called Amachi, and its mission is to provide mentors to children whose parents are incarcerated. So it does, real training and then matching up, and the commitment of the volunteers to the child has got to be a genuine one. These are kids who have already known adults in their lives disappearing. And so people who do this work at Amachi and establish relationships with these kids, it's somewhat like big brothers, big sisters, uh, but heavier. And I was at this event, and as these events do, they go on, and they were going on and on and on, and I was getting antsy, and I thought, I'm just gonna get up and walk out of this large room we're in and mosey around. And so I did, and in my moseying, I was at a place I'd never been on the South Side. And again, Pittsburgh's just constantly, providing you new venues, places you've never seen. And I was wandering around this really interesting place I was in and came upon the bar that had been set up. And behind the bar were a man and a woman. Um, and I sidled up to the bar and began talking to them, uh, the bartenders. And we had such an interesting conversation, uninterrupted. Nobody else came out. It was toward the end of the evening. And I found that they were married, that they had moved to Pittsburgh in the last year from New York City and were adjusting, but had clearly already made a number of connections. He was a videographer and artist attempting to find, work here because he'd done a lot in New York. And I'm not sure what her job was. She was from New Zealand. Just interesting young people. And they were tending bar just to do something and take in a little cash while they were trying to reestablish their lives. And they told me that they had found a big home. They said they needed a big home in Troy Hill. And the reason they needed a big home, and this is where the story got so fascinating, is that the man, the male bartender's uncle, great uncle, was an artist named Frank Mason. I'm sure you can look him up. And Frank Mason was well known a prolific artist and teacher in New York. Originally married to a woman whose last name was Harriman. And the person who was telling me this last night, I said, when you say Harriman, are you by any chance talking about the Harriman family? I'm thinking of the Averill Harriman. Look him up. These are like, big, big movers and shakers in the political world. And yes, that is who. So his great uncle is Frank Mason, and Frank Mason has a, I don't know what, an old building somewhere in Manhattan that he's lived in for decades, and it is filled to the rafters with art. It's an old, he uses it, he lives in it. I don't think it had regular plumbing. I don't think it had much heat, but that's where he'd always been, and that's where he stayed. And then he died. And his widow, his second wife, not a Harriman, his widow was left in this astonishing place with all of the art and continued to stay there. The bartender who I met that night also lived there. I had the impression that a lot of people were in and out, and some of the people that were in and out were the likes of Salvador Dali. Uh, it's just bizarre. Um, and anyway, I guess the rent went up and they couldn't afford it, and the widow's getting old, and somehow it's decided to take all of this art and move it to Pittsburgh. Hence, needs a big house. And that's the house I ended up in last night. It was built before the Civil War. It was the first house on the hill when it was surrounded by nothing but farmland. And it is, I can attest, filled with art that is mind blowing. Every inch of the walls, and there's tons of walls, filled with astonishing art. Um, Huge sculptures. I have never seen anything like it. And I didn't know the people who were there, but what a delightful bunch. Pittsburghers, some New Yorkers, one little guy. He was an old, tiny, little, gray haired guy. I think his name was David. And I began talking to him. And all of a sudden, in the course of conversation, I find out his line of work. And his line of work is he does the sound effects, the sound on Martin Scorsese's movies, and has for ever. Hence his wizened old state. And I thought, whoa. I said, wow, that must be him. Yeah, yeah. And we talked about it. He talked about how interesting it's been, how anxiety producing it can be, how he feels such responsibility. But clearly he's one of Scorsese's, team and has been. I bounced from one person to another guy, another old person who had studied theater in Paris forever and still goes there every year and is and struck up a friendship with James Baldwin, for God's sake, and stayed with Baldwin at his place in the south of France in Saint Paul de Vence, a little medieval village that I've had the extraordinary pleasure of having visited myself. Pittsburgh. Surprising always. You go to talk to the bartender because you're, well, bored and needed to get up. And you find yourself meeting these people with such interesting lives. And they invite you over and you go. Really something. I don't know. I could go on and on. The people there were just, I mean, mostly they were either old farts like me or wondrously young people like the bartender and his wife. And I did meet the widow, Frank Mason's widow. I mean, she didn't introduce her. I didn't realize it until I was leaving. This beautiful old woman, beautiful, who was impressed by my ability to spear some salmon with this little wooden fork and get it to my mouth without dropping it. Wow. And the bartender at one point sent me, I mean, to call him a bartender is ridiculous, but I'll always think of him as the bartender. The bartender sent me uh, just wonderful videos of some of his work and also of a New York Post article that had been written, I get probably a few years ago, when they decided to pick up all this astonishing art and bring it to Pittsburgh. So the New York newspaper did a big story, mourning the end of this chapter and story that I'm sure has so many permutations and interesting offshoots you can't even imagine. So anyway, I wanted to tell you that because it was just, whoa. I saw Pittsburgh in a different way. I met people I've never met. I My mom always says, because she goes to anything anyone invites her to, and I say, Mom, why would you? I mean, she said, oh, well, I went to some a competition of some opera. I said, you don't even like opera. Why? She says, well, you always say yes because you never know. You never know who you might meet or what might happen. And you can't have experiences and you can't see new things if you don't force yourself out of your comfort zone. Get out if you can. Engage another human if you can. And I must say, by nature, am relatively reclusive and definitely a loner. So for me, it has never been easy. My mother is where's the party person, like Susan, but not I. And I'm reminded often of how much better it is to push yourself out. Believe me, I hadn't wanted it. I thought it's snowing, it's cold, I don't know any of these people. What am I doing this? Oh God, I gotta get dressed. My hands in a cast, I can hardly move. And I did it. So I'm just saying, it's a good idea. I mean, it was a good idea. There's something else I need to tell you, and I'm going to ask Kevin to post the story on my Facebook page. I'm hoping it'll be there later, maybe this afternoon. And it's a story that I knew of, but was so thrilled this morning to see covered uh, in the local media. And it was covered by one of these nonprofit news sources that I support monetarily and then get their reporting. And it's that is Public Source. And I do again recommend that if you're wondering where do you get news, this is a place that digs deep into local stuff that I don't know. Well, see, I don't get the scab paper, so there's a lot I'm not seeing anymore, I suppose. And this is one of the ways I fill in the hole. Publicsource.org. But I saw that they'd done a story on something I'm sure I must have talked to you about because to me it is such an unbelievable thing that is going on. And I happen to be close to the people who are doing it. And the headline of the story is Allegheny County Jail, Duquesne University use Hamlet to explore justice. I think I've mentioned to you this and how I had wanted to bring my friend, who is really the mainstay of this program, Susan Stein, on the show to talk about it. But she is so busy doing stuff, consequential work like this, that it's hard to get her still long enough to admit well to get here. So she has been on the show before in other guises. She has a one woman show that she came on the years ago, and this piece on what she and Duquesne are doing with inmates at the jail is just mind blowing. And I want you to read the piece, but more than anything, I want you, there's a video in it. And the video in it is of one of the inmates, a guy who's identified as Sean Daniels, gets up in the class, it's a class at the jail, made up half of inmates, half students from Duquesne who go into the jail. And they use Hamlet as a way of getting at ideas of human emotion, revenge, murder, justice, but also to then explore possibilities of mediation. Like, how could Hamlet end without everybody dying? What could have happened? And in doing this, the residents of the jail, many of whom have never read Shakespeare, many of whom have never certainly memorized a soliloquy and acted it, many of whom have not had the opportunity to have these kinds of sort of fascinating discussions and deep dives into their own humanity and choices. And there is a video of this guy doing a soliloquy that, if you know Hamlet, it's a Hamlet, and he's saying, "Am I a coward? Who calls me villain? And I have never seen anything like what this man in prison scrubs pulls out of that speech." Oh, shut up, unknown caller. So, just I, I'm going to put it on. Oh, for Christ's sake! You know what? I got to talk about this later. I mean, I so am hating technology. I know there's good stuff, but my God, I was talking to a guy at this party last night who is what did he say he was? He's an anthropological, no, he's a cultural anthropologist. And he's writing a book about how that fucking phone that we all have in our hands all the time, how it has remade us in every way. Believe me, Donald Trump would not be president without it. The way that powerful forces can get at us and in our heads and literally addict us to them. They know how to do it. He had been at the University of Chicago when he was in schooling, and his thesis, I think, was about gambling. And this is before the cell phone. And about how people get hooked. And we I'll give a few people, maybe, I don't know them, I'll give a few people, some dispensation here. But I'd say about 99% of us, easily, are hooked. We're hooked. We're changed physically. Do you know that because people hold their heads down instead of up, we are physically, evolutionary, we are physically changing. And when your head's down, you don't make eye contact with other people, do you? Not as much. It's just mind blowing when you think of that thing that has imprisoned us all. But anyway, guys, I'm going to get this posted on Facebook. You have got. I mean, you can also get it by, going to publicsource.org. The article is extraordinary. And I can't imagine the impact on the lives of the students in it, be they residents of the jail or Duquesne students, mixing with each other, being vulnerable with each other. I had been aware of this guy's soliloquy because Susan Stein, the woman who is the main teacher, had come to my home for dinner at that day after he had done that soliloquy. And she was still in a, I mean, I can't, she described to me what had happened and how she had never seen anything like it. And she's a professional actor, never seen anything like it. A guy who had never acted. And she said there was somebody videoing it. And I said, "Oh my God, could you get it for me?" And she said, "I don't know." And you know, I never did get it, but I did today. In the public source article, there he is. And something amazing happened, in part because of his extraordinary rendition of this soliloquy. He was up for getting out. He had maybe a week later or a few days later had a court appearance in which he maybe could have gotten out or would have been told, no, you're staying in. And the sociology professor who founded this program and many others working with him, this extraordinary guy named Norm Conti, Professor Norm Conti. He was there that day too with Susan and blown away. And he did something he has apparently rarely done. He wrote a letter to the judge and told the judge, this man has so much potential. And he wrote a recommendation, and I am just thrilled to say that he was Daniels, the guy who's in the video, was unexpectedly released from the jail a few weeks before the course ended. He had barely served his minimum sentence. And Conti said he has never done such a thing for any other incarcerated student that he's taught, and he's taught hundreds and hundreds. And he was so blown away. And when Susan was here that night, Susan Stein, she was telling me, I mean, it's so emotional, of how these prisoners would take their book, Hamlet, back to the cell. Initially, when the class started, they were told they couldn't have the books in their cells, which is just madness, of course. And somebody in a position to realize it eventually said, of course, they can take the books back to their cells. And so, you know, next time you happen to drive by the Allegheny County Jail, imagine that in some of those cells are guys memorizing Hamlet soliloquies One did the poor Yorick, I knew him well, and fashioned a skull out of who knows what, you know? What a wondrous thing in every respect. And I guess I'm telling you all of these stories today rather than talking about you know what, because we've got to remember that there are so many people in this world who are worthy of our time, worthy of emulation, and that in whatever way we can find, we can be part of helping each other. In whatever spheres that we orbit, right? To try to move things forward. And now let me just say, because I went nuts there when my phone went off, that I also had intended to rant a bit today about commercials. I mean, that's a big subject. No, it's commercials, be they on television or radio, that use in them the sounds of a doorbell ringing or a phone ringing or a siren. And I think all of them should not be allowed. And I'm sure some of you already know what I'm going to say. I'll just start with the last one, the siren. You ever been in your car? Have you ever been in your car and you're listening to the radio and there's a commercial on or something and you're not really listening to it, but all of a sudden it employs a siren sound and you might, you know, immediately become alert. You might slow down. You might look around trying to figure out where the siren is so that you can do the right thing and pull over, right? Or if you're just in your home and some damn commercial comes on and a phone rings in the commercial and it is your ringtone, the one you heard when my phone went off. It's ubiquitous. And you jump up, maybe. But you don't know. Is that mine? Is that what? Whatever. It's so unbelievably annoying. Anyone. What are people thinking when they do that? Or a doorbell. Excuse me. Do you know what a doorbell does if you have a dog in your house? Oh, so many times when I have, those sounds, I'm probably not thinking of some others, but those are the biggies. If they come on in a commercial, I know the ambulance one, by the way, the TV station commercials often have them, and it's stupid, and it could create a situation where an ambulance actually has to be called. Unbelievable. I, so many people don't think. And if you're trying to get someone's attention and get them to buy your product, I don't think you want to piss them off or get their dogs barking uncontrollably. So there's all of that. Rust Belt says the doorbell here makes my one cat go hide and the other cat heads to the door. Well, you've got an introvert and an extrovert feline. That's great. Um, okay. So I am going to successfully, I hope, avoid talking about you know what. Because, guys, I can't. I, I so loathe him. I'm so enraged at it and what they're doing and about to do and going to do and all the damage. And rather than, I really think we've got to take care of ourselves by not letting him live rent free in our heads, as is his desire. Um, and look to what we can do. And what we can do is, again, be involved with others. It doesn't even have to be political work, like what Norm Conti and Susan Stein are doing at the jail. You could say that's political work, yeah, but they're using their skills as teachers to open doors up to people in need and people who've been discarded. So I think we all just need to look and find opportunities in our daily lives and maybe push ourselves into uncomfortable places to try to simply be a positive force that pushes in its little way against the negativity, the cruelty, the anger, the hate. And that's what I'm going to try to do. Roger's written, and Roger, I see. I don't know the reference because I never watched Star Trek: The Next Generation. But those of you who have will understand what he's saying. Roger writes, "Your smartphone is the Borg, telling us to lower our shields and surrender ourselves. The Borg has added their biological and technological distinctiveness to our own." Well, that I understand, because that is what this technology has done. It is remaking us. I used to say we're cyborgizing ourselves, and I don't necessarily divorce myself from that. It seems a little dramatic, but I think it's true. And to see it happening, and to know that there's really no way to stop it. That this is evolution. This is evolution. And Darwin couldn't have conceived of it speeding up the way we are speeding it up. The brains of children born in the last 15 years and into the future will literally be wired differently than yours and mine. So we're almost creating the next generations are literally going to be biologically different, I think. And then their children, God knows, and their children, until I suspect we get to more of a true cyborg, where people will look back on the and think how absurd it was that we walked around with these things in our hands, looking down, when they will simply be implanted, right? You know that's where it's heading. So again, I go back to, so while we're here and still in touch with our humanity and our common humanity, let's try to help fellow humans. Gigi writes about these sounds in commercials. I'm so glad you mentioned this. I cannot tell you how many times I've cursed the radio or television for various sounds in their stories or ads. My dog runs to the door, or I'm convinced I'm being pulled over when I've done nothing wrong. It is so annoying. And on another topic, we cannot allow the crazy orange one to live in our heads. Hear, hear. We have to take care of ourselves and be involved with other folks to keep us grounded. Tough for us news junkies who now have little desire to read every story. But yes, obviously, I so totally agree with you. Many of us will be going out in the next couple of weeks to participate in Audubon's Christmas bird count. If people need a distraction, this is a good one. Just Google Christmas bird count and enjoy the weekend. And Gigi has a quote at the end of her email by Gary Snyder saying, "Nature is not a place to visit, it's home." And yeah, nature, yeah, God help it and God bless it. Oh, and Ed writes, your comments reminded me of the powerful recent film Sing Sing. Oh, I've got to see that. Yes. Sing Sing with Coleman Domingo, that extraordinary actor. And it is about a program somewhat like this. It's not really, but about another program in prisons. And it's about prisoners that are in a true theater program and how they put on plays, including Shakespearean plays, and how it impacts them. And Ed says many actors in the film that are in this film had been prisoners and had participated in the theater program while incarcerated. And speaking of this, the prisoner who's now out from the Allegheny County Jail, who's in the video, I'm telling you, you've got to see. That guy is, if he doesn't, actually, Susan was going to alert some of the theaters in town to him and say, reach out to him. And this is a guy who obviously is able to do what is extraordinarily hard to do well, which is to make yourself totally vulnerable and inhabit the reality of a character. And it is the thing I, who had studied acting, was good at faking, which most actors do. They fake, and some are really good fakers. But the unbelievably wondrous actor is the one who's not faking, who truly is living in the moment the truth of that character. And people who are able to do that, what my acting teacher, Sanford Meisner, what he would say is he said, you have to be willing to be private in public. You have to be willing to bear yourself so that no genuine emotion is censored because you'd be embarrassed, right? You'd be embarrassed if anyone saw you in a state. This guy, I mean, I would never have been able to do what he did with this because he just literally spills his soul, his guts out in this class using words written 500 years ago. Whoa, just mind blowing. Okay, something else, an everyday thing that I've been meaning to rant about, and damn it, I'm going to get to it now, even though I don't have as much time to do it as I would want. Maybe we'll revisit it at a later date. But it is the fact that on any given day in my emails, I come upon a request to write a review or take a survey. I mentioned yesterday, I've been having lots of doctor's appointments and having to have tests done and this kind of stuff. And every single visit, the next few hours, I get, you recently visited, blah, blah, blah. We want to know how we did. And it's not just that, it's Giant Eagle. It's every place you've ever had anything to do with now want you to, what they say, give them feedback so they can better their service. And you know what? It's sort of like bagging your own groceries, you know? I am sick and tired of these places asking me to do their work. About 6 years ago was the most egregious one when that's when I thought, oh wow, these things are such bullshit. I was at my car dealer. I had brought my car in for service and they'd serviced it. And on the way out, the guy says to me, I'd really appreciate it if you would go on, he gives me this thing, you go online here and rate your experience with me today. And please give me all 5 stars. If you don't, and he literally said, if you don't give me all 5 stars, if I didn't give him an A plus, I would potentially be costing him his livelihood. That was sort of the sale technique he had. And my reaction was, fuck you. What possible information is gleaned from that kind of a extorted system. And then, of course, these are all farmed out. This is not Giant Eagle doing this. This is somebody they contract with who may boil all this stuff down and make them a report here and there. I'll be damned. And what somebody called it it's hard to say, the fetishization of capitalism. He says what this is, stop and think about it. For centuries and centuries and centuries, humans bought and sold things to each other. And he said that relationship of buyer-seller was akin to a one-night stand. At this moment, I need this, you want that, and our needs and desires are symbiotic, and so a transaction takes place. And then you move on. And he says, and now with this rating everything and the sort of aggressive insistence that we rate every transaction, he says it's capitalism trying to make every transaction the beginning of a relationship. Yes, they're suggesting we could have a relationship. And as I said, all of these things are contracted out to some third party that gathers all the crap that the people answer. And whether or not, and in fact, it's probably then put into some algorithmic thing, and AI does, or a chat, it's just do not engage. There's this one guy who said he was visiting his dentist. His mouth is wide open, and a nurse shoved an iPad in his face and asked him for a 5-star review. He said, so we're now into a review begging. It's not only do you have to tip everybody now, you got to review them. And he said, look, this is insane. I already paid you. Now you're asking me to pay you more in the form of a review. If you want a review, then how about pay me? How about you pay me for this feedback you want so much? If we're in a relationship, it's give and take. So I know I could do a lot more with this rant, and I know that you guys are going to be responding to this. So maybe we'll pick it up again. Oh. Yeah, I was going to say on Monday, but I'm not going to be here on Monday because, yes, I have another medical thing that couldn't be scheduled at a different time, and I'm sorry about that. Um, so I'll speak to you next on Tuesday. Beth writes, life is short. I refuse to give away any minute of my time or any of my thoughts for free to these companies. Screw them. That's the spirit. Seriously. They got us bagging our groceries and then they want us, yeah. And you know what else? When you call these places, to even get a human being, yeah, is almost impossible now. You're dealing with robots, chatbots, as you know, which can drive you insane. And you also may not know that the company may be using a voice. I forget what they're called, but they actually are determining using, again, algorithms, like how freaked out you are. I'm so sick of it. And doesn't matter because it ain't going away. It's only going to get more so. Brooke writes, about 15 years ago, I got a new pair of glasses and I was picking them up. The girl said if I filled out a review and brought it back, she'd give me the glasses case and the wipes free. Oh, you know, I also feel for these employees now because they are obviously, I hate this. This is one of those nouns that has been turned into a verb. They are tasked with this kind of crap, and they're incentivized. There's another one. They are incentivized to, get reviews. Well, God help us. And let's remember, you can't wait around for God to help us. We got to help each other. We really do. We've got to help each other and look for the good stuff and look for the good people and look for the chances to move things forward. I'm very appreciative of your time. I truly am, and I'll be back on Tuesday. I hope. Thank you. Have a great 4 or 5 days. Don't fall. Leave that to me.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.